I'm Annika. Like Lisa said, I've been an herbalist for more than 30 years. I'm also a registered nurse. I went to nursing school well after becoming an herbalist. I've been a nurse for like 20 something years, about 20 years. And I really became a nurse because it's really, really hard to pay the bills when you're an herbalist, you know, and once I had a kid, I decided, well, I really need I need a steady paycheck. I need health insurance. I need all those things. And nursing really fit really well for me, but I never stopped making my own medicines from plants. I've done that. I do that all the time. And I really love working with plants, and that's been my passion for most of my life. I did learn about cannabis as a medicinal plant in herb school, but I really didn't give it that much attention because it was, number one, illegal, number two, very expensive, and there's so many other great herbs out there. So I didn't use it as a medicinal plant for a long time until I think it was about 9 years ago. My teenage daughter, she was 16 at the time, was having some really severe mental health challenges, like really major. She spent 16 days in a hospital. It was a really, really rough time. And I was researching everything I possibly could to figure out ways to help her. And I read about CBD and anxiety, and I was like, all right, sure, we'll give it a shot. And I really didn't have much expectations. Within 3 days of starting her on CBD, it was like a switch got flipped in her, and she was like incredibly much more in control of her emotions and chilled out. And I mean, essentially she went from unstable to stable, and it was just mind-boggling, and it really got my attention. I was like, wow, okay, I've got to like put some serious time into learning about this plant. And I did, and I just got fascinated with learning all about it. It's a very complex plant, and the way it interacts with our bodies is just fascinating, which I'll get into. And that was when all cannabis was still basically illegal, before the 2018 Farm Bill. The Farm Bill made hemp, or low THC cannabis, legal as an agricultural crop. This was before that, but I was able, so hemp was, couldn't just like go out and buy it like you can now. But I figured, I'm an herbalist. I should be able to, I mean, CBD was expensive then. And I was like, I should be able to figure out how to make this on my own. And I got my hands on some hemp and started experimenting. And the stuff I was making myself worked as well, if not better, than the really expensive stuff that had been produced in the lab. So I was like, okay, we're good. And I was so into it, so fascinated and kind of obsessed. And then I tried it on my husband. He had bone spurs in his neck from an old motorcycle accident, and he had flares of that, which were really severe, like severe enough to be prescribed narcotics and all that. And I tried to convince him to use CBD, and he's like, if Vicodin doesn't help, how is this stuff going to help? And I was like, just give it a try. And so he started using it both topically on his neck and internally. And after a week or so, he was like, yeah, it's definitely feeling a little bit better. And then a couple months later, we went away for the weekend, and he forgot it. And at the end of a long weekend, he was like, oh my God, this is how I used to feel all the time. And then that repeated itself several months later when he forgot it again, and the same thing happened. So he is a total convert now. So seeing how much it changed my daughter's life and improved my husband's quality of life, I was really, really invested in CBD. Honestly, I didn't start out to start a business, but I really, really felt compelled to do so. It wasn't a smart idea. The CBD field at that time, it was rapidly changing. It was legally like ambiguous. It was a crowded field. Everybody was starting to get into CBD. This was right after the Farm Bill was passed. But I really just felt driven to do it, and I did. And within a year, I had to quit my nursing job, or I'm still working. I'm working per diem, but I was like trying to keep up with the business and working full time. It was like not a sustainable lifestyle. So that's how I got into it. So my company, Primal Botanical, I make everything right here in St. Johnsbury. I use hemp that's mostly grown in Cabot, Vermont. I do use some concentrate that's also grown in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. And I extract the hemp myself, which is actually quite unusual. Most companies buy extract that's been, or concentrate that's been extracted in a lab and then just add it to a carrier oil and call it handmade. But I extract mine right and use the flower itself and extract that directly into oil, like old school herbalist style. And most of my products are certified organic and all full spectrum. I'll explain what full spectrum means in a little bit. So that is me, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with my screen sharing. If anyone has any questions at any time, please just go ahead and interrupt me. I'm not going to be able to see you raise your hand or anything while I'm screen sharing, but just go ahead and speak right up. I don't mind at all. So I consider this class like a CBD 101, just an intro to CBD. So I'm going to go over the history of cannabis. What is CBD? How does it work? What is it used for? How to take it, the different kinds of CBD that are out there, dosing of CBD, side effects, medication interactions, and how to source quality CBD. Before we get started too much, I just want to clear up a couple common misconceptions. So cannabis has kind of two branches, hemp and marijuana, and it's a legal distinction. By legal definition, hemp has to contain below 0.3% THC. THC is the compound in cannabis that gets you high. If it's got above 0.3% THC, it's considered marijuana. A lot of people, I've heard all kinds of things like, oh, hemp is the male plants and marijuana is the female plants. No, it's all the same exact species. It's just breeding that makes it different. I'll get a little more about that further on too. Another distinction that people get confused about is hemp oil versus CBD oil. Most people know that CBD is made with hemp, so they think, oh, hemp oil, that must contain CBD. Not so. Hemp oil is made from hemp seeds, which don't contain any CBD or any other cannabinoids. It's got a lot of omega-3 and 6 and 9 fatty acids. People use it as a supplement. You can use it in cold food preparation. You know, it's got some nutritional benefits, but it doesn't have any CBD at all. So very common misconception. All right, we're going to go ahead into the history of cannabis. So cannabis is one of the oldest cultivated crops in the world. There's evidence to show that cannabis has been cultivated as far as 8,000 BC, which is ages and ages ago, for fiber and rope and stuff like that. It started being used as a medicine. The first documented use of medicine was in China in 2800 BC, still a long, long time ago. It's been, sorry, I'm trying to see my notes and my slides at the same time. It's a little challenging. So there's documentation of ancient use in China, India, Egypt, Greece. Here, this has both Greek and Arabic writing on this document. Persia, it's mentioned in the Bible. It was widely used in medieval Europe. This is from the 1100s, I believe, and this is from the 1500s. So very widely used long ago. Also widely used in early America. These are slides from Mount Vernon, which is George Washington's estate. Obviously, these are photographs. It's got a living history museum there now. But so George Washington grew hemp on his estate, as did many of the other founding fathers and presidents. It was actually required to grow hemp in some parts in the colonies and in England. If you were a farmer, you were required to grow hemp. Clothes, rope, paper, and canvas were all made from hemp. The early American flags were made from hemp. Some of the early documents, like the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, I'm not sure if it was both, were printed on hemp paper. So it's really ingrained in our history of this country. So here, this is a hemp harvest on an old $10 bill. As I said, several early US presidents and founding fathers grew hemp, many of them. There's conflicting information about whether they actually smoked it. There are a couple quotes attributed to Washington and Jefferson about smoking hemp, but other sources say they really didn't. So who knows? They may have. So hemp, or cannabis rather, was listed in the US Pharmacopoeia from 1850 to 1942. And drug companies that still exist today, like Eli Lilly and Parke-Davis, produced cannabis extracts. They were very, very popular and widely used medicines in the early part of the century. In the 1910s to 1930s, this country saw an increase in immigration from Mexico. Fear and prejudice against immigrants became associated with cannabis, which was coined marijuana to associate with Mexicans. Before that, other than Spanish-speaking countries, it was marijuana. It was never called marijuana. It was always called cannabis or things in other languages. A campaign to link the use of marijuana with violence and crime, primarily committed by racially inferior or underclass communities, including Blacks, jazz musicians, prostitutes, and lower class whites. This is the Reefer Madness era, if you guys remember Reefer Madness, which was an anti-marijuana movie. So politicians with ties to the paper, timber, cotton, and oil industries spread all kinds of myths about cannabis, about it causing violent behavior and sexual promiscuity and all kinds of things. Harry Anslinger, who was the commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, said, quote, "Reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men." And a Texas senator said, "All Mexicans are crazy, and this stuff, marijuana, makes them crazy." So a lot of racial issues all intertwined with the whole world of cannabis. So in 1937, against the expressed wishes of the American Medical Association, who at this time considered cannabis a very, very popular or very effective medication, so they were really against this, the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act was passed. This was the first time marijuana had been, or cannabis had been restricted to this extent. The Tax Act placed very high taxes on anybody involved in the cannabis industry, whether you're a grower or a product maker, and even including physicians. So physicians, if they wanted to use cannabis for their patients, they had to pay large, large sums in taxes. So it kind of made farming cannabis financially impossible. And it really crippled the cannabis industry. The Tax Act was designed to cripple the hemp industry, clearing the way for the paper, timber, and cotton industries, because hemp could be used for paper, for cloth instead of cotton. And so there are actually some really famous people who are instrumental in this. William Randolph Hearst was a newspaper magnate. He had timber, he had a lot to do with the timber industry, and he could see hemp coming in and disrupting the timber industry. Andrew Mellon and the DuPont family, they were involved in, like DuPont Chemical, they were involved in nylon production. And so the hemp as a fiber threatened the nylon, the burgeoning nylon and other fabric industries. So these guys had big ins with politicians, and they lobbied hard to make cannabis, or to pass this tax act to cripple the hemp industry. And in 1970, cannabis was put on the US drug schedule as Schedule 1. If you're familiar with the drug scheduling, it's drugs that have potential for abuse and in their various categories. Schedule 1 is the worst or most illegal group. It's drugs that have no medical use and a high potential for abuse. So including stuff, ecstasy, LSD, heroin are in that category. In Schedule 2, which is less restrictive, you've got cocaine, fentanyl, oxycodone, and methamphetamine. So all those are considered safer and more useful than cannabis, which is really ironic. All right, in 2018, the Farm Bill was passed, and that legalized hemp as an agricultural crop. It took it out of Schedule 1. As long as it had below 0.3% THC, it was good to go. So that was huge. So today, cannabis is legal for medical use in 38 states and for recreational use in 23 states, but remains federally illegal. So these green states are where it's legalized recreational and medical, and the blue states are where it's just medical, and then the gray states, it's illegal. Federally, though, it is still illegal and Schedule 1, and which makes it very complicated, a very strange, complicated, unclear legal situation. It makes a lot of problems for banking. It's hard to get a bank account. It's hard to get a credit card processor. It's tricky. The FDA has approved the use of 4 cannabis-derived drugs. Yet, ironically, cannabis still remains in Schedule 1, considered no acceptable medical use. So our own government is talking out both sides of its mouth there. As the laws have changed, cannabis has become a really big and profitable business for some people. Yet tens of thousands of people in the US are still in prison on cannabis charges. There have been some pardons, but we've got a long, long way to go there. All right, we're going to move forward. What is CBD? So again, I just want to have this slide in here again. So hemp and marijuana are both cannabis. Hemp has high THC and low THC, below 0.3%. Marijuana has high THC and usually low CBD. Back in the day, before there was a lot of extensive breeding of cannabis, cannabis generally had fairly equal amounts of CBD and THC. And then when people started breeding it, they wanted to boost the THC levels higher and higher to make you more and more stoned. And in doing that, the CBD dropped. It's kind of, it can be like a seesaw. So the CBD was inadvertently bred out of cannabis. So the really strong pot that we have these days is very low in CBD. And in recent years, people have been breeding for the opposite, to have high CBD and low THC. And that's where we get the hemp that's used for medicine. So you can think of it like peppers. Peppers, you can grow a bell pepper that has like no heat at all, or you can grow a ghost pepper, which is so spicy that nobody could ever eat one practically. And then there's all kinds of peppers in between, which have different levels of spiciness. So you can think of cannabis like that. It's all the same species. There's just different breeding to bring out different characteristics.
Annika, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Do you have any insight as to why breeders started breeding for CBD and why they would have known that that was something interesting or valuable to do?
I think I'm not sure, but I think the CBD started getting popular with childhood epilepsy. There were kids. It was discovered. Well, it's been known for centuries that cannabis helps epilepsy, but in the 80s, I think there was a real movement of parents with young children with severe epilepsy trying to use medical marijuana. And a lot of them actually moved to Colorado, which was one of the only places that had a medical marijuana program. And people noticed that there were some higher CBD strains that seemed to work better for these kids. And I think that was the jumping off point where that got the whole CBD ball rolling.
Thank you.
Yeah. So hemp has, or cannabis rather, has over 100 different cannabinoids. THC is the one that gets you high. That's the most famous one. CBD, it doesn't get you high. The other one, none of the other ones really get you high. The THC is really the only one. But they all have different and overlapping medical benefits. THC THC and CBD have been studied very extensively. CBG is kind of the new one of the moment that people are really interested in, but there's way less research about that. But hemp has all these cannabinoids in it in different levels. Let's see. So CBD works with our endocannabinoid system. So our bodies make our own cannabinoids, plant cannabinoids, just similar like we make our own opioids, endorphins, our natural opioids. We make our own cannabinoids called endocannabinoids. Endo means within, so our own cannabinoids. And they're similar in structure to the plant cannabinoids that we get from cannabis. And we have receptors for these cannabinoids everywhere in our bodies. And this is absolutely fascinating. This system wasn't even discovered until the late 1980s. That is so recently. There was a researcher who just died, actually, an Israeli researcher, Raphael Malacham. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right. But he identified several of the main cannabinoids. I'm not sure if it was CBD and THC or both, or I'm not sure, but he identified them. And then so he was researching THC and wanted to know how it worked in his bodies. And he realized, he discovered that we had all these receptors for cannabinoids and that we make our own cannabinoids in our bodies. So literally practically every cell in our body has cannabinoid receptors in it and can make their own. We can make our own cannabinoids in a lot of our cells. There's two types of receptors in different parts of the bodies. And so the two round things are two different cells, and it's just showing the little balls are cannabinoids, and it's just showing how they can interact with the receptors on the cells. This is a picture of below those gray lines is the inside of a cell, and above is the outside. And the red things are the receptors on the cell wall, and these circles are CBD, and it's just showing how it can attach to the different receptors. It doesn't attach directly to the cannabinoid receptor. Above that blue triangle, that's a THC molecule. It's showing how it actually blocks the CBD molecule is blocking the THC molecule from docking. And that's the reason why CBD can block some of the negative side effects people can get from THC. If you get too high, people can get like really paranoid. You can get a fast heart rhythm. But THC can mitigate some of those unpleasant aspects of THC. But CBD interacts with opioid receptors, dopamine receptors, and especially serotonin receptors. Serotonin is what most of the antidepressant medications work on, and CBD interacts a lot with serotonin receptors. Let's see, I think I really covered all that already. That's just more of a close-up picture. So our endocannabinoid system works in the background, kind of directing all the other systems in our body. It's sort of like the puppet master behind the scenes, pulling the strings. It interacts with every other body system. And we couldn't survive without an endocannabinoid system. It's an integral part of our physiology. One example of how that works, well, it's responsible for maintaining homeostasis or balance in the body. So our bodies are always trying to get back into balance. One really visible example of this is the fight or flight response. When you get scared, you get that like rush of adrenaline, you get into the fight or flight mode. And when the danger is past, we settle back down again. And that's the endocannabinoid system going back in and saying, everything's okay now, we can relax. That's what's orchestrating that recovery from fight or flight. So that's just one example. But so a lot of what the endocannabinoid system is responsible for is our immune response, our appetite, our motivation and reward, our metabolism, inflammation, all stuff like that. A lot of anxiety stuff too. A lot of mental health stuff is related to the endocannabinoid system, as well as the serotonin stuff. Here's another picture of the endocannabinoid system. So yeah, the central nervous system, gastrointestinal system, the hormones, the bones, immune system, metabolism, and muscles. So it's really, it affects everything all the way through the body. All vertebrates have an endocannabinoid system. Bugs don't, but almost every other class of animal and everything with a spine.
Question, Annika?
Yes, go ahead.
How come we never heard about this before?
Well, as I said, it's still not really taught much in medical schools, but it wasn't discovered until the 1980s. And I think there's been a lot of stigma against cannabis. It's been a challenge to study it and to do actual research on it. There's been serious restrictions placed on it by the government. People have been able to study it, but you have to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to do research. So I think it's becoming more and more known, but honestly, I'm not really sure why I mean, that was 1980 or late 80s was, 30 years ago or more, 40 years ago. So I'm not sure why it's still not widely known.
Well, and think too about what was going on with the war on drugs at that time, right? And a researcher comes out with a whole body system that has in it the same word as this drug that, the government is fighting, right? So no wonder it feels stigmatized and like people don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
It's something to do with it. So we can have deficiencies in our endocannabinoid system, mostly due to most of us don't live a very healthy lifestyle here in the United States. So things like poor sleep, poor diet, lack of exercise, all those things that we know are not good for us can actually lead to deficiencies in our endocannabinoid system. And this can lead to symptoms or diseases. Some diseases that are, or syndromes rather, that are kind of poorly defined, don't really have causes that they can really pinpoint, like irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, fibromyalgia, that kind of stuff. It's hypothesized that those are due to an endocannabinoid deficiency. So when we can't make enough of our own endocannabinoids, then the plant cannabinoids can come in and help us boost our cannabinoid system. This is interesting. There's speculation that humans had constant exposure to cannabis, not just through medicines and food, but through animals, because animals were fed hemp and cannabinoids got into the meat and the milk in low levels. And we've been coexisting with cannabis for so many thousands of years that when it was suddenly criminalized this century, it was sort of an abrupt lack. It was taken away from us fairly abruptly. And so this is a theory. I'm not sure. I haven't found any solid data to support that this was true, but I thought it was an interesting theory. All right, so CBD supports the endocannabinoid system by indirectly interacting with the cannabinoid receptors. It also inhibits an enzyme which breaks down endocannabinoids. So if there's less of the enzyme to break down the endocannabinoids, that means more is available for the body to use. CBD interacts with other receptors, as we saw in that last slide, notably serotonin receptors. So what is CBD used for? In 2022, 26% of Americans used CBD. That's more than a quarter of our population. That's a huge, huge number. It's for something that wasn't available less than 10 years ago. It's really remarkable how quickly it's caught on. So the most common reasons people use CBD are pain, inflammation, anxiety or stress, or difficulty sleeping. But because it works throughout the whole body, it's really used for a broad range of medical conditions. Studies demonstrate effectiveness for pain, anxiety, PTSD, epilepsy, addiction, arthritis, fibromyalgia, migraine, mood disorders, psoriasis, eczema, Parkinson's, MS, inflammatory bowel disease, neuroprotection following stroke or traumatic brain injury, and symptoms from cancer treatment. among many other things. And there's a pretty substantial body of knowledge. It's a body of evidence for it, despite the challenges with research. CBD allows people to reduce or eliminate medications, which is a wonderful thing. Americans take way too many medications. I'm a nurse. I see how many medications people are on all the time, and medications come with a list of side effects, some annoying, some very potentially dangerous. And anytime you can use less medication with something as safe as CBD, I'm all for that. Especially narcotics. Everyone knows how dangerous opioids are with our opioid epidemic. And in states where medical marijuana has been legalized, there's been a reduction in opioid use. So that's a huge, huge advantage. So this says 22% out of these responders substituted their medication with CBD, almost half of them replacing their other painkillers. So there is, you can take CBD in a number of different ways. You can take it internally or externally. So internally rather, you have the oral route, which would be edibles, good old pot brownies or gummies or stuff like that, capsules, or adding CBD to food or drink. And over here on this chart, this is over on the right, the oral route is going to be the slowest to take effect. It says 20 minutes. I don't think it can take 20 minutes. I think it's more like 1 to 2 hours. Sublingually is here in the middle there. Sublingually means you put the CBD drops directly under the tongue. When you use it sublingually, some of it is absorbed directly into the bloodstream, and that's more efficient because when you take it orally, it all has to be digested and you lose some to liver metabolism. So sublingual is more efficient and faster. Smoking or vaping over on the left, that is the fastest way for sure. It's quite immediate, but it also doesn't last as long. So that's really good for quick symptom relief. If you have, an aggravation of pain or an anxiety attack or something like that, that's a great way to take it. It can also be used as a suppository, which is really great for any lower GI problems or pelvic, like gynecological problems. Externally, it can be used as a topical, like a salve, cream, or an oil. And that's also in the middle on this chart. It takes about half an hour to an hour, I would say, to work. It can also be used transdermally as a patch. Patches have stuff in them to push medication into the bloodstream. So when you use it topically, it works great where you apply it, but it doesn't absorb all the way into the bloodstream. And a patch has special stuff in it to push it into the bloodstream. So why choose different methods? Topically is great for localized pain or inflammation, but not much else. Actually, it's really good for skin conditions too, like eczema and psoriasis. Internally is good for widespread or systemic symptoms or anything brain related, like anxiety or insomnia or something. A topical isn't going to be useful for those because it doesn't go to the bloodstream. So there are different kinds of CBD. Full spectrum means it contains CBD and all the other cannabinoids that are within the plant, plus other things like fatty acids, flavonoids, and terpenes. Terpenes are kind of like essential oils. They're the essential oil of the hemp plant. Broad spectrum contains all those things except the THC has been removed in the lab, but it contains everything else. CBD isolate, everything's been removed except the CBD molecule alone. There's nothing else in it. So all these things work together to create an effect called the entourage effect. It's kind of like the sum is greater than what is that phrase? The sum is greater than the parts. I don't know what it is. You guys know what I mean. Yeah. So all of these things work like a symphony together to create an effect. And when you take some of these things away, it doesn't work as well. So going back to this slide, I'm a big fan of whole plant, full spectrum medicine. Broad spectrum is for people who are really don't want any THC, and isolate, I'm just not a fan of at all. It's just missing like 90% of the good things that are in the hemp. It can be effective, but it's, you have to increase the dose a lot, and I'm just not a fan. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Okay, so dosing is the question I get asked the most. Dosing varies tremendously from person to person. Some people do great with a tiny dose of 4 milligrams. Other people take over 100 milligrams. So it's a really broad range, and it depends on a lot of factors, but a lot of which are kind of mysterious. So weight and size plays a role, but not as much as you might think. A larger person will need more, but not as much as you might think. Individual body chemistry and metabolism is the biggest factor. We all have different endocannabinoid tone, and so some of us need a lot more cannabinoids, and some of us don't need very much to do the job. The severity of symptoms, the worse your symptoms are, probably the more you'll need, and the formulation and concentration or potency of CBD. So CBD is available in an overwhelmingly large number of potencies. Some are really weak, some are really potent. It just really depends. So this is an example of, these are the potencies I offer with my CBD oil. So the one on the left is my weakest. That's 500 milligrams and 2 ounces. So 1 milliliter of oil contains 8 milligrams. My middle one contains 16, and my highest one contains 25 milligrams per milliliter. You'll find oils that are weaker and oils that get a lot stronger. And it doesn't really matter what strength you use. I tell people you should just concentrate on the number of milligrams you're taking. So if you have the weaker oil, you would just take 3 times as much to get the dose of the strongest oil. And people generally need to go through a period of trial and error to figure out what their dose should be. Best way to do it is to start with a very low dose and gradually increase your dose until you get to the effects you're after. CBD does have side effects. Oh, oops. So there's a sample dosing schedule here. I have a guide that has a lot of this information in it. I'll give you that information at the end, so don't worry about trying to remember all this stuff. So yeah, going up gradually is the best way to go. It does have some side effects, but they're very mild and self-limiting. Fatigue, diarrhea or nausea, appetite or weight changes are the most common ones. People also get headaches. I've actually never heard of that personally, but it's on the list. Dry mouth, again, I haven't seen that. People can get a little bit lightheaded. It can drop someone's blood pressure a little bit. Irritability, I have heard a couple of people say it makes them super irritable. It's not common, but I have seen it in a couple of people. But all these are very, as medication side effects go, these are very, very mild. One big thing to watch out for, however, where CBD can be dangerous is how it interacts with medications. It interacts with a lot of medications, like 60% of them. And it uses the same liver enzymes that most medications use to be metabolized. So it can affect the metabolism of those medications and leave you with a little bit too much or a little bit too little medication in your body. For most medications, that's not super, not a really, really big deal, but there are certainly some where it's essential to monitor them closely. And blood thinners, cancer chemo, and seizure meds are the most risky ones. And those, I always tell people, you can't take CBD without clearing it with your doctor first. It's not impossible to mix them, but you just need to the doctor might need to make some medication adjustments. Grapefruit, interestingly, affects the liver enzymes in a very similar way to CBD. So some drugs come with a grapefruit warning. Don't have grapefruit while you're on this medication. That's an indication that you need to be cautious with CBD. Taking CBD a few hours before or a few hours after your medications can help with the interactions. Always, if you're on medications, it's always wise to check with your prescriber or a pharmacist before adding CBD. Topicals, however, totally safe to use because the topical CBD doesn't enter your bloodstream. It's not going to interact with any medications. I do have a CBD dosing guide that goes into all this in much bigger detail. It's available for a free download on my website. Oops. Let me just get caught up here. Okay, so drug testing. If you take CBD internally, there's always a risk if you can have a positive test for THC. So for people who need to be drug tested for their job or for legal reasons or whatever, they're really taking a gamble if they take CBD internally. Taking CBD isolate is safer, but there's still plenty of people who have tested positive for THC even when taking the CBD isolate. So I hope that the situation will change. There are some big companies who are taking THC off of their list, off of their testing protocol, and I expect that'll change more and more in the future. Okay, when you're sourcing CBD, you got to really be careful where you buy it. There's a huge variation among CBD products. There's some really awful products out there, and there's some dangerous and fraudulent products out there. So you really don't buy it at the gas station. Yeah, you really got to source your products carefully. So there's several questions you can ask when you're sourcing. So how is the CBD grown? Is it organic? I'm a fan of organic stuff in general, but for CBD, it's extra important because CBD is what's known as a bioaccumulator, which means it can suck everything out of the soil and bring it up into the plant. It's super efficient at this. In fact, hemp has been used to clean radioactive soils because it takes the radioactivity out of the soil. But that if we're going to consume that plant, it means that if there's any heavy metals or pesticides or herbicides in the soil, that's all going to get sucked right into the plant and go right into the medicine. And obviously, you don't want a medicine that's contaminated with that stuff. Being certified organic is your greatest indicator that it's not going to have that stuff in it. Where is the hemp grown? A lot of the CBD products available in the United States are made with hemp grown in China. China is notorious for producing contaminated agriculture. And again, because hemp is a bioaccumulator, you got to be extra careful with it. So I would never take a product that was made with hemp grown in China. This picture on the right is where my hemp is grown in Cabot. Which parts of the plants are used? So on the left, we've got a combine or something harvesting and grinding hemp in the field. Some companies do use the whole plant, but CBD is concentrated only in the flower and in the sugar leaves of the plant. The big fan leaves don't have much hemp, and the seeds have none. The stalks and stems have basically none. So if you grind up the whole plant and use it, it needs extensive processing to concentrate the CBD in there. I just use the flower or the bud of the plant, which is where all the magic happens. So the more flower you use versus stalk and everything else, the higher quality the medicine is going to be. Has it been lab tested? So typically CBD products are tested for potency, but also for contaminants like pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals, molds, stuff like that. A good CBD company should have these test results available, either posted publicly on their website or available if you ask. My CBD bottles, all my labels have a QR code that you can scan and get right to the test results for that. Again, a quality thing is the full spectrum versus broad spectrum versus isolate. I would always choose full spectrum if you don't have a compelling reason to avoid THC. And I would not recommend isolate for anybody, honestly. So I just wanted to give you an example here. So for instance, if you go to Amazon and you put in CBD, you'll get all these results. This is just a search for CBD on Amazon. There's all kinds of things in here. But actually all of these products, only one of these products showing up here contains any CBD at all. And if you look carefully at them, they say, hemp oil, hemp gummies. And as we discussed, CBD is made from hemp, but hemp oil and CBD oil are not the same thing. Here is an example from Amazon. This is hemp gummies. These certain things I circled up here. It doesn't say CBD anywhere in this listing. It says CBD MD and CBD FX. Those are two like big national brands of CBD. It also says CDB. So they're keyword loading here. And to make people, it's to fool the consumer into thinking like, oh, hemp gummies, isn't hemp and CBD, that's great for anxiety and pain and all this stuff. And these products are packaged in a very deceptive way that uses language, you know, like hemp gummies for anxiety, hemp gummies for inflammation and pain. And it's not going to do any of that stuff. I mean, hemp oil itself, you know, sure, it's got some nutrients in it, but it's like flaxseed oil, you know, it's very similar to that. It's not going to do anything for these conditions. And yeah, so you got to really be careful. I've talked to a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I tried CBD, it didn't work for me. And I say, okay, what did you take? Oh, I got gummies, hemp CBD gummies off Amazon. I'm like, no, you didn't. They're not CBD gummies. Yeah. So yeah, another thing people tell me when it doesn't work for them, I say, okay, well, how much were you taking? And they said, oh, just, you know, whatever it said on the label. And that's really, that's what it says on the label is really just a starting place. Like I had someone just this past week at the farmer's market had been taking some of my product, and I asked her how much she'd been taking. Like, oh, 1 dropper full. And she was taking my least potent product. So 1 dropper full was probably like 6 to 8 milligrams. And that's just kind of a starting place. So you really need to give it a try at a variety of different dosages before you write it off as not working. So when I see people who say it didn't work for me, then I just usually, I mean, it doesn't work for 100% of people. It's not magic, but I think most of those people haven't given it, either had a bad product or haven't given it enough of a dosage. So here is the difference between hemp oil and CBD oil. I think I had the same slide at the front, but I just had this at the end too, just to remind you, when you're looking for CBD oil, just make sure it's not actually hemp oil. The label should say how many milligrams of CBD are actually in the product. So on mine, it says 100 milligrams cannabinoids on the front of the label, and on the back panel of the label, it says how many milligrams of CBD there are in a milliliter. So that's one indication that it's a genuine, or should be a genuine product. Yeah, if then you can see the lab results for the product, that's another indication. So I do have these free resources. So I have the 7 questions to ask before buying CBD. This is like a 12-page booklet I wrote that you can download for free from my website. And the other one was the CBD dosing guide, which just goes into a lot more detail about getting started with the dosing and some safety considerations, like the stuff I already talked about, but in a lot more detail. Those are both available for free from my website. When you go to my website, one of my tabs along the top is freebies, and that's where those live. So here's a QR code that you can get to my website and my Facebook and Instagram pages. I'm not sure where else that goes, that particular, I've got several QR codes. Oh, I also have I think my CBD for dogs article is on here. I have a lot of dog customers who use my unflavored CBD oil drops. CBD is wonderful for dogs. And that's about it.